go ahead and get started. So welcome to this presentation of the Regenerative Communities Alliance webinar series, and this webinar is on patterns for partnering and collaboration. And Jamaica and I will be co-presenting. And we just kind of wanted to start it off with a bit on the arc of this Regenerative Communities Alliance itself. And so I'm just sharing here a shared vision statement that's created as on the screen. Jamaica, do you want to read that?
I'd be happy to. And just a reminder for everyone else to mute. We're getting a little background noise. So what is the Regenerative Communities Alliance? Well, we envision a world of interdependent cooperative communities, stewarding the conditions of regeneration, justice, peace, and abundance in order to realize the full potential of flourishing for all life, for all generations to come.
Great. And while we know that is a lofty goal in many ways, it's a context for us to come together. And in honor of the collaboration with Now What, I say that we have a lot of alignment there. So I wanted to take a little bit of a journey through this context for building on a participatory commons and understanding how important trust is when it comes to scaling for partnership and collaboration. And so there's just a small series of slides here. Ben, I know you're on the phone, so there'll be something I can share later, and I think you may have seen before. Just going to walk through that a little bit. It's just acknowledging, at the family level, you have a very small scale, but a lot of trust. And at the nation scale, you have the far extreme other end of that. There's a very large scale, and so the trust is not as consistent. And you see where the village lands there, sort of in the center. And we're looking in this context too around intentional communities, co-housing, that type of larger intentional community size where we have the scale of trust. It can be a high level of trust, and the size of the group is still also relatively small. And then as we get into larger models for different types of co-ops and corporations, you see where they show up on this map. So our goals with the work that we're doing to strengthen with partnership and collaboration and cooperation is to be able to increase the amount of trust. And so there are various systems that have emerged to try and create that. So you have examples with the DAOs, the distributed autonomous organizations, and open co-ops, protocol co-ops, and this model that we're going to talk about a little bit more of sovereign accountable commons, and similarly the context for participatory commons. So to give a little definition for that, participatory commons is an organizational framework using multiple levels of participation to organize human effort and resources into purposeful endeavors where the multiple levels and types of wealth created by those endeavors benefit the universal commons while also allowing free agency of the participants to co-generate and share wealth of all types. And so I'll break that down a little bit, but there's also a goal to share this more and unpack this more in some other space too. So as we look at it, really understanding that it's a social and cultural context for what we're creating to be able to have wealth pools. And there's a strong ecological metaphor to pools or reservoirs and wealth as a commons. And so,
Thanks, Yala. Yeah, continuing with some patterns that are sort of fundamental, I wanted to get in a little bit today about the patterning of the journey from personal to global coherence. And by coherence, I'm gonna say I mean well-being, integrity, wholeness, integration, and it's an important pattern, I think, because without personal coherence and personal well-being and personal wholeness, then we can't sort of become a globally coherent species. So I like to just break it down to the simplest pattern that exists of the circle, and the sort of origin of our own life is this one-celled organism that then begins to multiply in its complexity, but it also maintains that integrity of that wholeness that we're sort of imbued with. So I think when we're talking about both on like a personal journey, starting with our own well-being and our own wholeness and our own work and our own sphere of influence, working where we can to create that integrity in our own life, then feeds our interpersonal relationships. I think that our deepest, most intimate relationships, we're talking about the circle of trust, as Kala was sharing, really depend on the maintenance and ongoing individual well-being, then coming into a space of agreements and a shared commons. And so right at that little space where sort of our own experience overlaps with someone else's, if you're looking at that second shape between us, that space where we intersect with another is, for me, a place of fortifying agreements and creating a sense of agreements that form the relationship. And we're doing this with life all of time. It's always this set of agreements that are agile and changing, ever changing in a moment, but that's where our life intersects another. And then the space in between, the overlap, becomes the commons. It's that which belongs to all of us, and in some ways, which belongs to none of us. So when we talk about commons, there's sort of so many different ways to approach commons, but I think at this really fundamental level, it's this agreement field between us and then this co-creative potentiated space. And then so as we come deeper into the communal sense, as we complexify even more from the interpersonal to the communal, this commons is something for us to collectively steward. It's a place that is the co-creation between us. Oh, I'm not sure why our video stopped there. But it's a co-created space between us, and it's essential for our ability to come into a global context, for us to begin to learn how to steward at these micro levels and these regional levels, a sense of shared stewardship and purpose and collaboration and cooperation. When we get to the global scale, the complexity sometimes is so daunting to face. How would we come into a global cooperative? Yet I feel strongly that until we've learned to become personally coherent and work on our cooperative interpersonal relationships and have that informed healthy communities and healthy and resilient bioregions, then we can't really start to approach that global scale. So these are just some important patterns to consider. And for that next one, so the idea of, well, culture is something that's I'm really passionate about. What do we mean by culture? I believe strongly that, particularly if we're talking about like group or community culture, that our intrinsic values, what we value as people, inform our beliefs, and they kind of inform each other. That what we value and what we believe essentially lead to the practices that we choose. And I feel like to particularly work with collaboration with groups, to really clearly understand and define and be aligned to a shared vision, and then the way or mission with which we will realize that vision. All of this, to me, starts to create a culture. And
Jamaica, your sound went out. I'm not sure if it's because of your headset, so you might want to maybe. Still don't hear you. Okay, we need to do a little troubleshooting. Do you hear me? Jamaica, do you? Oh,
there we are.
yeah, we're back.
Yeah.
Great.
Were you unable to hear me for a moment?
Just for a moment, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, my internet might be a little unstable. Let me know if that happens again. Yeah, so I just wanted to share that, particularly for cooperative culture, when we set in the center purpose, when we align around what we're in service to, and we're clear in our endeavor that the greater whole collectively agrees to align our individual path with the shared purpose between us, these are group cultures that I see be successful. And taking the time to really build the foundation for these, really taking the time to understand and translate our shared values and what we actually mean by those shared values, and really to get underneath that to flesh out what our inherent beliefs are, then I think that informs the practices that we choose in order to fulfill the mission and the vision in service to our purpose, our shared collective purpose. So I think these are just really great base fundamental perspectives to consider when you're building out or even stepping into a culture. How are we creating cooperation by aligning ourselves to these aspects of a shared space together? And you see here on the screen, for those of you who can see it, a few best practices, which I think are another essential thing for groups to really uncover and co-create together. These are some best practices that I know that myself and a few of us who work together would agree that these are important best practices. They're definitely time-honored and experiential, that these things, when we apply them in group settings, really help to create cooperation and a feeling of trust and mutuality. But in general, rather than read any of these off, I'll just say that I think it's essential for a group to co-create your best practices together.
Okay, so Jamaica, yeah, I think maybe if you stop the video, it will help with the audio. So I just kind of want to give a little support for that.
That we employ.
Okay. So
Sorry about that one.
Your audio has been cutting out a bit, so I was going to turn off your video and just see if that helped. But yeah,
I'm happy to do that.
Go ahead.
Is this better?
Yeah, we hear you. Yeah.
Right. I apologize, everybody, for the glitchiness of that. We're still in Mercury retrograde. Essentially, what I was just saying is that in terms of healthy collaboration, I think that establishing your own best practices is a really fundamental part of building out the culture and making sure that any new members that arrive align and understand and agree to abide within the best practices that you set. These are sort of these cultural agreements that help us to navigate the inevitable sort of challenges that emerge when we're in collaboration and cooperative environments, but also help us stay clear in the cultural way that we've agreed to play with each other and to work together. So here are a few on the screen, but I think essentially it's taking the time to establish what best practices are going to work for, and making visible and transparent to your group. Making it something that can be sort of, visible on a wall or readily accessible virtually, to keep kind of reminding. I think that it's essential to have people be self-selecting and accountable when in a cooperative environment. So making these best practices very tangible and clear and easily accessible help sort of return to the compass if we're off track or if we're confused or if we're experiencing tension. Making these accessible helps people to kind of, be self-accountable to the fact that we've made these agreements to be in a shared space together.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I think it can also be really helpful. Sometimes the term best practices is, is not as accessible even in terms of culture for some folks, or they are put off by that in some way. But it really just makes sense to continue to tie it back to the values and agreements, like the actual agreements that are being made together to of how to work together. So these things and they are practices indeed, and absolutely they're like the practices that make the agreements embodied, and that's part of that carry through. So just kind of carrying that through to the I just wanted to add that point. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kayla. It's super important. And this one I am actually going to read. Again, some of you are on the phone, but certainly there's more to be added to this list. But I feel strongly like some essential ingredients for collaborative groups are to align with your vision, to make sure that we actually take the time, that people sort of, I think it's important to have like some sort of rite of passage where someone says, like, I'm stepping inside of this container of agreement. I'm stepping into the intention to work together. I'm stepping inside of the agreement to fulfill this vision that we have together. So an alignment process, I think, is really important for groups. And I think asset mapping the collective intelligence and resources, really just seeing the playing field of what you have accessible between you. I think it just makes us feel more buoyant that it's possible to achieve our vision when we see the amazing resources and capacities of the people we've drawn together, but also making those visible and tangible, I think, really helps us to know what can we draw on to fulfill the vision. And Kella was just speaking about it, the crafting agile agreements, agreements that can live and breathe and continue to shapeshift as we evolve as a group is essential. So it's craft agreements and then recraft them as many times as needed through healthy processes so that we can continue to stay fresh and current to what the group needs as we grow and as we continue on our journey together. Um, I also think that making accountability and the value shared between us visible is super essential. That we acknowledge our own responsibility to contribute, as we've said we could, or in ways that feel equitable, and also that we understand the value we each bring and that we're all contributing is super important. Kala, did you have something?
Oh, I just know if you're ready to weave. I mean, I can weave this into the next piece, but yeah, just or would you do? Did you want to wrap up on that slide more?
Sure, yeah, I'll wrap up on this. Just essentially that, as you can see here from these different bullet points, I think creating cultural understanding and shared practices like we talked about is important. Determining the function and the scope of what it is that people will be doing together so that we're really clear about how we play and how to best show up. And identifying the different levels of ways that we can participate and clearly how to sort of come into deeper responsibility or take a more peripheral role, and what that process is super important. And clearly making decisions together. How are we going to do that? That in itself is a whole process of deciding together how to decide things together. And I really believe strongly in adopting tension revelation. So protocols ahead of time that are sort of like the prenup, that are like, what happens if we're not getting along? Let's from the beginning design or adopt, if we haven't already created them, the ways that we're going to move through tension and conflict, and how do we do that in a very healthful and respectful and cooperative way, including how do people ultimately transition through the group, how do people leave a group in a way that's coherent and that's respectful. Sometimes it's time to end a pattern and end a way that we've been cooperating before, or it's not working out for some reason, but front loading into your agreement process how you're going to navigate those spaces, I think, is essential for healthy group culture. And then how you're going to bring new people in. How do people step on? What are the ways of helping people feel aligned and informed and ready to participate and create? I think these are some essential ingredients for collaborative groups.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. Yeah, there's a lot there, and definitely a lot of what's important. Can mention now that we can make the slide deck available to folks offline after this too, just to be able to take that in, and there's more resources that we'll share. But yeah, so just kind of weaving from this into something that we've been doing a lot of work in the Alliance, more around figuring out how to be more inclusive and to understand a lot of the blind spots that exist in existing culture and existing patterns. And so there's a lot of uncovering of different types of unconscious or unintended bias as well. So I think this is an idea that's time is very much alive in lots of different spaces. I've been really inspired that it's alive in every scale of environment that I'm working in, local, regional, global. It's a conversation that's woven through that space. And we are one of our past webinars was dedicated to the topic, and we have more to come. And within the Alliance, we've been doing more strengthening there. I will share that in the global context, in the Now What space lately, and also in Bright Future Network, a lot around translation and language, and understanding that there are ways in which the use of the English language is very dominant in a lot of our spaces, and how do we navigate that? How do we understand the roots of the language and the roots of the culture, and how those can influence that? So so there's a lot to be able to unpack there, and a lot of it that we're approaching from the ecological metaphors as well. So understanding the pattern level solutions and being able to do retrofit on culture. It's basically understanding the cultural DNA of these existing spaces, and how we can create regenerative culture and the DNA of regenerative culture. And one thing that I'll name here in this presentation, I've been naming in a lot of conversations, is that having regenerative belong to everyone, so all peoples, is really important to our movement at this time. So what we're doing is just trying to do any ground truthing and making sure that that feels true, because there's ways that words like sustainability and different things like that don't necessarily feel accessible to everyone. They don't feel like they belong to all people. And so in order for this movement to really grow and flourish at a planetary scale, to be able to help resolve some of these issues, we want to be able to really have regenerative belonging to belonging to all people. And yeah, just really understanding that power and privilege shows up in all the relationships that we have, and that if we have a design for our agreements and our culture that includes being able to do that, then we'll have it integrated with our yeah with the actual culture, just at that root level, and just naming it right up front, the way that power shows up there. Similarly, all the different ways that cultural differences of any kind will show up in that space. So there's a lot that can be unpacked in that, but definitely wanting to really just name how those pieces show up, and how we can make the design of the environments and the design of the organizational culture really genuinely accessible to people. So yeah. So we're going to weave from that context into a little bit of the asset mapping piece. And there's some really great examples of offers and needs markets that we've been that have been hosted, and we have in our within our Regenerative the Village broader community and community of practice, community of embodiment around Regenerative the Village. That some of this work has really been coming out with offers and needs markets, and ways of having community toolkits. I just actually on the screen, this team canvas example is actually just an example, and not promoting it as a specific tool, though I think it illustrates kind of well some of the ways that you can map the assets of a team specifically, and really clarify what pieces each person is really bringing, let alone before you get to the specifics of which tasks everybody is doing. But this is still just about like what everyone is prepared to be able to do, and then the goals kind of unpack more of the tasks if when you get the team level. And we've done some exploration with asset mapping in the context of whole system design, and this ties into the work of some of the work of Barbara Marx Hubbard and Buckminster Fuller, and those kind of uh, visionary thinkers in the realms of holistic design and holistic mapping. Jamaica, would you like to add something?
Yeah, just for the asset mapping, one thing I think that's really really practical tool for folks too is sometimes as simple as a Google form that you send around to groups that ask like a questionnaire of their skills, of their hidden talents, of their needs, of their resources, like physical resources, infrastructural resources, etc. So I think sometimes that's a really great practical way too for groups and communities to sort of find out more about what is within them in terms of collective potential, and then everybody has visibility then to a shared spreadsheet on the back end where you can see these categories. And sometimes that's also a really useful, practical, easy, accessible tool for doing some asset mapping.
Yeah, it's a really great example. That's a really great example of how forms can be used that way. And similarly, some of the tools that we've used in the mapping of now what, and the mapping of the in different contexts of just what groups and organizations people are part of, what their backgrounds are. And there's a lot of really rich ways that we can graph that data and make it visible and explore that. So it's really great to be able to name what it is that we're wanting to be able to make visible. And I guess that kind of flows well into aspects of making things visible. So we've been exploring ways to have contribution tracking and accountability systems those are obviously parts of the success of partnering and collaboration in different ways. And so what are the methods of contribution tracking and accountability systems, and also appreciation, because appreciation is one of those values. And so especially when we want to be able to map not just financial value or time that's dedicated for exchange on financial value, but also a value of all types. And remembering, harkening back to the participatory commons definition and the multiple flows of wealth and types of wealth. And so this is one of the realms where the different models. So we just have a little list on the screen here of the check-ins, like verbal check-ins and direct conversations and reports, things like that, which can be really helpful. Spreadsheets, making abstracting visible on a spreadsheet and still checking back to it. And larger scale, more integrated systems like a DAO where you have roles and integrated um, uh, tracking with things like the social ledger, which is a project of the Digital Life Collective that's complementary to a model of CAS, which is cooperation as a service. And so these set of tools, a suite of tools, and ways to work with tools together to create a comprehensive system to support partnering and collaboration, value tracking, and ultimately, eventually, more of that moving of the value through that system. And that's what some of these digital models are bringing space for. And so, really, it is this context that we're wanting to scale up the trust and commitment that happened at the village level, where people really saw what each other were doing and had the chance to verbally appreciate it directly. And now we're wanting to be able to scale that to all different scales, and still also do it at that most local scale too, and have those be able to weave and connect together. So the the examples that started to give around ways to support virtual collaboration. So I just kind of segued into that, of course, by talking about the contrasting of local to global, but the virtual collaboration, as I keep finding, continues to need to be a tool for the local too. And this is a breakthrough area for lots of our communities within the networks of the Regenerative Communities Alliance, the intentional communities and the eco-villages. Many will have their own need for, and do have their own need of virtual collaboration spaces. And some of our goals are to create coherent collaboration systems that can also be interoperable. And some of our work in the Alliance is centered around interoperability with data, which is in general, which is then, of course, naturally weaves into the ability to share and show value. So just kind of looking at some of these aspects, and yeah, Jamaica, if there's anything you'd like to share on this slide too, feel free to chime in.
I think you got it, Bo.
Okay, well, that's great. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. So yeah, so we're looking at that aspect of how they, I guess I'll make mention of one point around the inclusivity of technologies too. This is one of the stumbling blocks that we've bumped into in the cases of just trying to onboard folks of diverse backgrounds into different platforms, and how do we make that work? So there's a culture clash sometimes with rural eco-village type mindsets, or folks that are involved in different environments. How does the technology really integrate with their lifestyle and not become this kind of cumbersome interface that they have to try and figure out how to interact with? So there's some, and we're just touching on collaborative funding, and within Now What, there is an experiment for the collective for how the funds that come in through the event and how the collective that produced it will decide what they'll decide to do with the funds together, and that was using Open Collective, and so it's a good example of exploring a wealth commons. And I would say that I like these opportunities to create a smaller scale experiments because it's kind of daunting to create the new economy. So creating it at small scales and playing with it in these teams and in these more agile environments is a really helpful way to do that. So definitely really feels really good. I'll just touch on this last point, which is the proposals and presentations as part of that culture for collaborative culture, and it's true of sociocratic process or and consent decisions and advice decision process and sociocracy, where ultimately we're wanting to make a case for our idea, making a proposal. It's similar in DAOs, there's a proposal process, and you make that proposal, you want to gather that support, then that you also get that feedback that helps you make your proposal better. And so this is like a really strong piece of a culture of collaboration, that there's a spiraling process of design, a spiraling process of the way that the proposals can emerge too. Yeah. And Jamaica, did you want to share something?
Yeah, I actually, I did want to share that kind of feeding off of what you're saying right now, along with sort of tools that are available to us. I think it's a sort of social tools ways that we can continue to create connection. So much of our world is digital and virtual, and so much of our collaborations end up being virtual. And I think that in order to build this circle of trust and this sense of true cooperation between us, it's just important to sort of have these social technologies that we can also access to create like a true sense of circle culture. And I guess I mean by that, things like the pause, the sacred pause at the beginning when you're sort of aligning virtually, sometimes really helps as people have been busy from their day or there's multiple screens available. I've noticed that really stopping and pausing and becoming present with yourself first and then entering into the group dynamic really helps. I think doing personal check-ins and allowing people an opportunity, even if it's a very sort of and not all of our collaborations are always business or sort of project focused. Sometimes there is a more social engagement, but I think taking the time to really hear all the voices in a circle and create a sense that we're all in together and really sense where are we as humans on a human scale in that day is an important social technology for creating a sense of connection, that we didn't just sort of jump into our agenda, but we hear each other and we get to know each other and we understand where we're coming from today. I think that can really help the subtlety too. Like if you know someone's having a hard day and then later in the conversation, you sense attention, you're not wondering or taking it personally, you know that they're having a hard day. I think things like this that keep us human and connected grow a sense of cooperation and trust, even when we're working in virtual spaces. So I think things like that are important to consider when you're kind of setting up how you're going to work together, is leave some time and some space for being human together and making relationships, building and growing relationships, I think are essential. And maybe one more piece I just wanted to add would be somewhere in here to offer a sense of the blueprint of we. The idea, it's just one technology that's available, but it's a way of taking some time, whether it's at the beginning or a transition or when welcoming new people, to really sort of go into who you are and your best working style, you know, what tends to trigger or challenge you, and also where do you tend to flourish or best cooperate, what strengths do you bring to the table, etc. It's certainly one particular process called the blueprint of we, but there's plenty of ad hoc ways that you can simply say, how do we best work together? Where do we tend to get a little tripped up, and what works to pull us back to a sense of coherence if we've gotten off track or if we're feeling a little tense. So I think these are really important social tools as well to bring into a collaboration and set yourself up for the best possible conditions for true cooperation to exist between you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, and in the Bright Future Network, we refer to that as part of the optimal zone toolbox. So what are the things that help us to get into an optimal zone? We need those individually, but also as a group. And these are the things that we also call optimal zone first aid. You know, the ability to, how do you respond in that moment when suddenly now there's like a need that emerges? And so it's so nice to build a culture where we set up in advance, we practice in advance, so that then when the thing comes up, we've named it. And I do feel like the blueprint of we in particular really aims to cover that particular part where you name the way that you respond under pressure, or the way that you work when you're challenged or compromised, and be able to have that be made explicit up front in a team is something that usually people have to wait till there's a major challenge before it can happen. So, and that's from the Center for Collaborative Awareness. That's one of the that's the place that Blueprint of Waste. Thanks for mentioning that, Jamaica. Yeah, and we are going to actually make time for a breakout now in just a moment, and there will be a chance to unpack. There's been a lot of content, and we also know that everyone here is has their own background and experience with collaboration and partnering. So, Jamaica, do you want to share a little more about that?
Yeah, we'd love to give you all, we'd love to do a little networking, network weaving, and allow all of you guys to share your collective intelligence, your understanding about collaboration. So I have a question for you, and I'm going to have you just take a second to consider that question for yourself, and then we're going to break you out into some groups to get some time to dialogue. Remember, best practices are mute if you're not speaking. When you first jump on, introduce yourself. Everybody say hello so you know who you're chatting with. And then maybe if one person just reinstates the question. So, okay, here's what we're chatting about today. You guys can kind of self-facilitate a little bit of a dialogue. Make sure to leave time for everybody. We're going to be in this for about 20 minutes, so there should be plenty of time for everyone to take about 5 minutes or so to share. And then we'll pull you back in, and then we'll do a collective harvest to hear what came out of your session together.
Yeah, and if you have any questions, you can ask me to come. I can join any of those rooms easily, so it's no problem.
Yeah, and Linda, you can stay on with us. So if you weren't able to break out, no problem. You can just you can stay on or you can go into a breakout room and just listen and enjoy hearing what's being shared, as well as a way to participate.
And you will get a 1-minute warning at the end, and at that time you can just don't have to click on anything. It will naturally bring you back to the main room at that time. All right, enjoy.
Yeah, and so the question that I want to set you all up with is, what have been your greatest learnings about collaboration? I think that can be what have been the challenges and what came out of those, because challenges are amazing gifts for us to learn from. And also what's been successful in terms of whether it's a community or a project or an organization or more of a local community. What are ways that, what have been your greatest learnings? What have you learned from your time collaborating with other people? So that's the question we're going to send you off into the breakout rooms with, and we'll pull you back in about 20.
And do you have that handy to paste in the chat? I was just thinking that might be good to paste in the chat.
Yes, I paste this in the chat, friends. Let's put that right here. So for everybody, you'll be able to see the question as a prompter. And I look forward at the end to hearing what it is that you all shared with each other. I think we have the rest of the group joining here.
All right. Oh,
Hi, buddy. Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. Welcome back. So, yeah, so I hope that was a fruitful conversation. We want to know what you had to say. So what I'd love to do is just maybe we could take a round and give everybody an opportunity to share a little bit about what you shared or what you heard that was interesting in regards to the conversation around what are some learnings about collaboration that you've experienced. So maybe what we'll do is I will start with someone, and then you all can pass on to the next person that you see on the screen. And that way we get to hear everybody's voice. So I think I'd like to start with Claire, if you're available. And feel free, if everybody else mutes, but then feel free, if you feel to turn on your video or at least unmute while you're the one talking, and then you can pass it on to the next person. So Claire, what are some things you've learned about collaboration, or that was came out of the session you were just in?
Well, I kind of took most of the time, so I apologize to others. I asked if they needed time. So the challenge that I want to talk about is that the way I'd like to operate is that we have that we're operating off of shared group agreements and intention with any kind of policy that we're trying to put in place, or any project, etc. That's like, collaboration 101, right? But what my frustration is that there's a nominal agreement that, everybody, we wrote a vision and mission statements, and everybody's on board in agreement with that. But I feel like there's a deeper level of study and inquiry and conversation that needs to happen in the group, that not everybody is on board with engaging at that level, and that some people just kind of cruise on with some ideas that I'm feeling like, well, wait a minute, where's that coming from? How does that promote, economic democracy? So I want to break through that.
Thank you so much for that. I just wanted to comment on that because it's so personal to the very first part of what I shared, and a lot of the work I end up doing. We kind of blazed through it really fast. but I actually don't think groups take enough time to slow down and really get to know each other and find those core beliefs that are underpinning. Because it's so easy to just go, there's our mission, there's our vision, let's go. And without cultivating those sense of like best practices and really understanding where people are really coming from and translating what we mean by the values we hold, and then set into place how we're going to uphold our shared intention. So many groups move through that so fast, and I found that to be kind of like building something on sand. So yeah, I really want to say I hear that, and we would be happy to share some tools or things that I know have worked privately and offline. We can share those with you, Claire, because it is something that a lot of groups struggle with. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, I might say that we've spent over a year working at that level, you know, and, you know, spending a lot of time on mission, vision, blah, 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 blah. And Alberta, I didn't realize, is also in the same group, so she might have something to add. I'm going to mute now.
Thanks. Why don't we go ahead and pass it to her then?
Okay, I don't actually, Claire, I was surprised that that was what you chose to share, because that wouldn't have been where I would have gone. I actually had the most interesting and important learning, as it's a lot harder than you think. And you're going to have to take more time than you anticipate to make this happen. There was a lot of conversation in our group that had to do with burnout. And I thought that was interesting, that the people in the group spoke very eloquently about how the dilemma gets set up between being the champion of something, being a leader, and doing it all yourself. And finding that balance can sometimes be very tricky.
A lot of wisdom there, Alberta. Thank you. It's very true.
You want me to hand that off to someone now?
Yeah, that'd be great. Why don't you choose someone?
Someone not in my group.
Or we can choose for you if you're not sure.
I didn't understand. You want me to send someone in my group or someone not in my group?
Either. Whoever you'd like.
All right. Why don't I let you something else saying that something that you'd like to add to that. I'll hand off to you.
Did you hand it off to me? I think that was me. Okay, grand. Hello, everyone. Yes, it was lovely to be in a group with Alberta and Sarah. Rains was about to share great insight, and then he seemed to go into a tunnel or something, so we've lost him. But as a group, I appreciated exploring the balance in collaborations to allow for emergence, and how to be passionate about something and yet still spacious enough to allow for collective emergence to manifest something that's probably more resilient, because it's the product of many minds caring as opposed to one mind that's dictating it. And if they step out, then it can't persist. And so just this, you know, Sarah shared some stories about a project she was working on, and being able to like step back and have trust. And we talked about the importance of like stepping back implies having trust. Like if you care about something and you step back from it and you hand it off to others, you are making an action of trust. And that's I like that feeling a little bit more tangible than just like the perpetual like, yeah, I trust you. So check. That was wonderful. And I'll pass it on to our last of our trio, Sarah.
Sarah, you're muted.
There you go.
Hi. Yeah, it's as beautiful for me. I have to say, I kind of just happened to come across your guys' group and just jumped in, and then happened to see that it's collective conversation, and I'm in more and more position as leadership as I get more experience with certain things, and people look up for that. And yeah, like we were just saying, um, it's a beautiful space to be spacious enough to have goals, have boundaries, have some sort of guidelines, and at the same time leaving that space for other people to fill. Because something I was sharing with the group is that as a culture, you go to school, you do like all these things, and you follow a lot. And what time am I going to do this? What time do I do that? And right now I'm working with a lot of people that are 20-year-old that are just coming out of these establishments, and I'm telling them, well, what do you want to do? And I was just sharing with the group that today was a beautiful example, because we had a meeting, and I stepped out and let them do it, even though it's like that they'll they'll have different ideas and they'll move in different directions. And I came at the end and was like, so how was it? And it's beautiful to leave that space, because if we continuously fill it, it won't be filled by other people. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing. So to have a goal, and yet also trust the earth, trust the mother, trust the energies of the world. And that sometimes your goal was, I want this house built by the end of the summer, and all you did is the foundation, but the foundation is really well done. So that's been my experience in the last year, stepping up more, and um, being able to uh, do it in a way where I don't feel too exhausted. Yeah.
I love it when we share collective wisdom. Thank you. Yeah, it's really good to hear your voices. I really appreciate the thoughtfulness of what you guys are sharing. And I want to give Prodromus an opportunity. Then I have some thoughts too, just to help us wrap up. Thank you. Prodromus, you want to share what you were chatting about?
Well, I didn't get the chance to talk a lot, but I came to my mind a method of which happens to groups, dragon dreaming, which is about sharing, let's say, our vision each individually, how we would like it to be. Because let's say that we make a co-op all together here. I want to make franchises nationwide in 5 years. You want to focus more in the service, the quality of service, and how close we get to the customer. Someone else just wants to get his basic money to live by. And if we make this clear from the start, or at some point, we can see which roles we can have better. Because if I want to have a nationwide franchises in 5 years, turn the whole board to co-op, then having you leading the part of how fast we expand, where you want just to make money to live by, which is all respected and fine, and it's not gonna be effective for me. But if you have another role, or if the one who wants to serve to come closer to the people have this role, will be the best for all. So maybe we share our visions individually, how we would like it to be. If it was just ours, how we would dream about it, and we bring these dreams together, visions together, we get closer to our shared reality. That's basically, yeah.
Thank you so much for that. So
Thank
yeah, I feel like one thing to just like underscore is that, you know, what we're talking about with collaboration is truly a sense of cooperation, and cooperation requires a certain kind of willingness to be vulnerable. And vulnerability is an incredibly important strength. It means that we're opening some aspect of ourselves to become more fully true and authentic, and also to come and bring our gifts fully forward. So part of it is to be vulnerable enough to say, I actually have something really powerful to give, like to step in sometimes is the vulnerability to our leadership. And sometimes it's the vulnerability to, like, as all of you are saying, to like know how to step back and to trust. And it's vulnerable sometimes to sort of let go of something that maybe you're holding or is important to you. And I feel like it's a dance, that true cooperation and collaboration is this dance of sort of moving between those parts when it's time to step in or to let go, when it's time to make an offering or to acquiesce and be flexible, whether it's time to stand strong for something and how to do that respectfully and with grace, whether it's time to maybe take a pause or take a break or step out of a group because you no longer feel aligned, or to call for better alignment, to slow the process down. All these things are a dance, and I think the biggest part is that it takes this willingness to cultivate interdependence, to know that as a really important aspect of doing anything with anyone else, that this idea that we can't, it's like a sovereign integral is what I guess I want to say, that we are sovereign and whole to ourselves, kind of bringing it back to that first slide. And we're not, we impact and influence and are impacted by the rest of the world. We aren't islands into ourselves. And I think that we can't really go through life without intersecting with other people. So learning how to do that well and beautifully and uplift and create wholeness amongst us is a deep, long path that we get to practice with each other. And so there's no right way, but I think what we're trying to share are some tools that can only really be applied if there's a genuine willingness to say, I want to work with people. I know I can go further with others than I could go on my own. I know I'm made better by the ways that I am challenged or triggered by other people, and the ways that I'm inspired and uplifted by other people. So I just want to wrap with the beauty of what you all shared is there's, with all of that, there's a sense of sort of willingness and vulnerability to take the journey essentially with other people. And I think that intention alone will carry us through as we muddle and find our way into how do we do this well. But you all have the key underpinning for the, but we're here together doing that. And that's really the intent and purpose. So yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tamika, for that, and also for all the shares. I really appreciate, you know, just the way the different pieces of wisdom that came back from the breakouts, and feel touched by some of those in particular. And part of what I was wanting, the way I wanted to kind of weave into, like, to wrap or to start to complete, was to also invite the sense of well, from within the place of inviting the slowing down, but also inviting the, like, what's a next action, or what's a you know, an achievable kind of insight from this time. And it doesn't even have to have been related to the content especially, but it could be, and it could be woven through even what just came up, um, as practical as you want. But the idea would be to have this opportunity. We talked about the positive expressions or forms of accountability, you know, where you have other people to witness you. So this is just a chance to, like, be witnessed in naming something that you want to engage in, whether it's a personal practice around partnering or collaboration, something that you know about how you show up that you want to amplify or turn down, or that you know, some insight or some tools that you want to explore, or some other resources that you want to access. And naming too that, just like Jamaica did, we both have these skill sets that we support other groups with, and everything ranging from, like, you know, first, like, for like a free consult type conversations, into being able to help support with full stacks of digital tools that can support teams to and communities to really thrive. And that's part of what I'm passionate about bringing. But just before we get to talking about all that, but just really inviting that if there's something that you want to carry forth, the next action of some kind.
I'm going to model it, Cal, because I have one, and then I would love for each of you, only if it feels true, just grab the mic and share. I'd say a next step for me would be to send you all the PDF of the Reinhabiting the Village workbook. And Pro, I know I owe you that from last time. I think your email had gotten lost. So that's something that I want to take accountability for, is following up that I said I would share this tool and resource that Cal and I and others have developed to help groups to navigate the things we're talking about. So that is some next step for me. I would like to share the PDF with you all.
I will warm it up a little bit and share something too that it's a little bit of a acknowledgement of making more space. I'm excited about having recently stepped out of the board chair seat on the board of a nonprofit that I co-founded, and it's really exciting to have made space for the woman that's the new president there of the board, which is it's just an exciting thing. But when I was hearing that about that idea of trusting and making space, and how I just felt the ripple of that. So that's a recent step.
I feel a lot of inspiration. I really enjoyed the essential ingredients for collaborative groups slide. And well, multiple of the slides I took notes on and such. So I guess what comes to the top of my mind is just to share. Right before this call, I was talking with a community that's forming in Belfast, Maine, and I can just feel how few of these things they've done to create a shared identity, and just assuming that if we live and work together, like that will naturally emerge, and I hope it does, but sometimes it doesn't. And this adopt tension revelation protocols, interesting wording, but I really like that, and I think I could bring that to my team, is to make sure that everyone feels like they know what to do if they're disagreeing with someone else. Yeah, I want to make sure that's more explicit now that I see that's one of the essential ingredients. So
I'd be super happy, and anyone else too, if you guys would like to send over how to develop a tension revelation protocol, like what that is, and what are the pieces of creating that. I'm really happy to send that template over if that's useful.
sure, yeah, I didn't. I would love that. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. We'll save some time at the end. I want to leave some other voices for any other next steps or anything else you want to be here, but I'll make sure to have info for getting that to people. Did anyone else have a next step or anything that sort of came up for you about the ways that we can witness you in your collaborative process?
I just want to think more about some of the ideas and as applied to our context. So thank you.
Yeah, and if anyone has one that's not fully formed, but they want to just chat about it a little bit too, there's a little time for that if wanted, but not to pressure either. So, okay, Alberta, see that you need to sign off. Okay, thank you. Good, thanks for being here. We'll be sending out the recording to everyone who registered. So if you want to stay tuned, you can send us your email in the chat if we don't already have it before you sign off. Okay. Sarah.
Yeah, I would like to just ask how to send those information. I'm really grateful and happy to have randomly found this chat today, and would really like to stay in connection with people that are like neutral and that are outside of my group, so I can come to um, my projects with a little bit more centeredness. And so just really grateful. And if you can kind of guide me a little bit on how to stay in contact and continue this beautiful surprise of my day, that'd be wonderful.
Just a quick question there, Sarah. Did you, if you didn't sign up for the webinar in advance, then just go ahead and drop your email in the chat, either to me personally, privately, or to the whole group, either way. And I'll make sure that you get the follow-up. Oh, and we're also going to share a little bit more about that on the next slides, but your email will be good too. Pro, did you want to share something?
So the free ebook is the workbook that it was from the previous time.
Yeah, that's good. I want to make sure you guys have that. I'm actually going to
Okay.
send it out pretty much right away.
All right, I have this. It was nice talking with people with common healthy worries about how to get things better, and looking forward to the next conference. I don't know what's your plans for the future conference, video conference like this, seminars.
Kind of a good segue for us to share a little bit more. So, Jamaica, do you want to talk more on this piece? And then I'll...
Yeah, sure. So just to give context, that Cal and I have a project with the stewards of called Re-inhabiting the Village, and it's a multimedia project that now is sort of a living architecture. So it started as a full colored book, which we still have available in print and an ebook. That features articles from about 60 different authors and has amazing art and imagery from about 14 different artists. And it was a collaborative endeavor to put together. And it's just going through different themes around sort of village ethos and regenerative community and what that means. And it's a beautiful, inspiring book of these different perspectives and voices. And then the workbook, which is what I'm going to send to everybody, that as long as we have your email address, was collaboratively put together. That's sort of the like best practices 101 and tools, actual worksheets that you can work through with your groups that help establish the culture foundation for your project. And so that's a really great, useful tool, and we'll be sending that out. And then this is what Cal and I do, among other things, is, we're both consultants and do organizational designs and project management and support groups that are both facilitating the challenges that come up and also helping at the vision stage to create better frameworks for hopefully mitigating some of those challenges. And then we do different educational events. We do in-person events. We do online events. And we'll definitely be doing another sort of series, like a ongoing webinar series particular to these topics. So yeah, we have a lot of great community resources and templates, and we're here and available. And I think you all know how to reach out to us, or you will here shortly. So that's the Re-inhabiting the Village project. But mostly I want to say it's an ethos. It's sort of creating a dialogue and a conversation that helps us all share these ways of being on the planet that are more conscious and moving us towards a more regenerative capacity. Oh, and on that, we do have a Medium blog too that we're revitalizing. So there's some, you can look for Re-inhabiting the Village on a Medium blog, and there's some dialogue there, and we're welcoming articles. So if you're someone who is in this conversation and you want to be able to share, then that's another great place to sort of continue the narrative.
Great, thanks so much. Yeah, the Regenerative Village, that project is very much alive and emerging in different ways. So some more about how to engage, specifically with the Regenerative Communities Alliance. There's you can reach out. Also, we'd love to have your feedback on this webinar. So there's a link to a feedback form that we'll drop in the chat. And also, just kind of run through this a little bit. We are at a place to be onboarding individuals and organizations that are like in the right fit. And we have monthly networking calls that also probably be a great place for people to plug in. Those are on second Wednesdays. There's second. Yeah, I think it's second Wednesdays, and I'll confirm that with anybody as we as a next step. If you join, you'll get more of the clear information because you get added to an email group email. So that piece is there, and I'll just say that the monthly webinars, it's going to be just recurring like this. The next theme is we're actually it's either going to be another that's strongly focused around diversity and inclusion, or specifically on the theme of regenerative economics. And it's likely to be the blend of the two because of the importance of that. Where does the where do the roots hit the soil with that sort of making a difference? And so one of our projects within the Alliance has been a community land trust for collective liberation, which is a great project that's aiming at getting land access to people who have been traditionally working the land but not having necessarily access and to steward the land. So super exciting project, and more on that in the coming times, and more ways to reach out. You can find our page on the web and you can reach out to the group that way. And then also in the chat, I will, let's see, I'll drop the, let me just take a second to find that. So Jamaica, if you have something to say as I grab the form link.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I just want to say thank you for being and participating, not only in this, but participating in the work that you do out in the world. It's just really an honor to keep finding kindreds on the path. And there's a lot of people who are actively, like looking at in their own life how we can share leadership and collaborate and cooperate, because as that slide in the beginning said, we get so much further when we go together. So it's been a real honor to share some time with you all today and to share some of just a broad stroke of some ideas and tools that Cal and I have been using. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Jamaica, for co-presenting. And the link for that form is there in the chat, and we really appreciate everybody being here. So we can probably all open the mics, and we'll just say so long for now and hope to see you again soon. Also, if you want to participate in Now What, it's just the last couple of days right now, but nowwhat2019.com, and that will be evolving too. All right, everyone.
Thanks, all. Be well.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.